Hi, everyone, and welcome to our final spring renewal webinar. This is a next level PBL session. So essentially, how do you enhance project-based learning with educational technologies? So we've had, I think, close to 20 webinars so far this spring. So for those of you that had a chance to watch them live or watch the archive of them, we really appreciate you jumping in and joining us. Also, this is a good time where if you have any suggestions on another webinar series, if there's any specific topics, we are currently planning like a back to school fall series. So if there are any topics that you really are interested in, feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'm at tomdriscoll.edu, or you can always just go to our website, edtechteacher.org. There's a contact button. We'd love to hear your feedback. All right, so let's dive right into today's session. So really quick, as a background, I am the CEO of EdTechTeacher. I was a former high school social studies teacher for 2 different public school districts in Connecticut. At that time, I did a lot of research on, instructional technology. I did a master's program at Columbia University through Teachers College, and that was really when the one-to-one boom was starting, particularly the idea of blended learning models, the flipped classroom, those types of things. So I started to research, work with schools, work with individual teachers from around the country, and then started to transition to be a digital learning director. So I was a digital learning director for the Bristol Warren Regional School District here in Rhode Island, helped lead their Future Ready one-to-one initiative, also helped through the initial stages of the remote and virtual learning through the pandemic. And I was working with EdTechTeacher, I think part-time starting in 2015, became full-time, and then I actually became the CEO last May. So it's been about 1 year that I've been CEO. Feel free to reach out anytime, driscoll@edtechteacher.org, and then on social, I'm on the main social channels at tomdriscoll.edu. So a little bit about EdTechTeacher before we dive in. So EdTechTeacher, we've been around since 2008. And really our primary goal has always been to help teachers thrive in modern learning environments. As we know, modern learning environments are always shifting, particularly with technology. So it's our job, it's our goal to try to do all of the research and training for teachers and schools so that they can be comfortable in the classroom and that they can do their job best. Okay, so what do we specifically do? Most of it is professional development, working with schools, doing on-site workshops, some virtual, some hybrid. And also providing free resources like tonight. So providing webinars, blog posts. We have resource pages and collections that we're going to be pushing out very soon. For instance, we have a ton of stuff on AI and ChatGPT and education. So sign up for our newsletter. We'll send that to you guys monthly. And then also feel free to check out our website anytime at edtechteacher.org. Okay, so what is the challenge? So first off, project-based learning has been around for a long time. It's commonly confused between project-based learning and just doing a project at the end of a traditional unit. So we'll unpack that a little bit. But I found, especially when I was teaching, I forget exactly which year it was, but I tried to really go all in with PBL and project-based learning, and it's really hard to do. It's very challenging. It fosters deeper student learning. Research shows that it enhances engagement and student outcomes. But it's hard to do. It's really hard to design it and implement it, particularly if you're teaching in a K-12 setting. So what I'm going to do today is share with you guys some possible solutions. So overall, what I think is that when you are designing and implementing project-based learning, there are multiple ways that educational technologies can be used to help with the design and implementation of it, to not only make it feasible, but also to make it more, efficient, right? So one of the biggest challenges I found with project-based learning was it wasn't the most efficient model to get through the content, to get through the skills, but using EdTech and instructional technologies can kind of plot it out in a way that you're still hitting the standards, you're still hitting the skills, you're still getting the content. It's not taking forever to get through the project, but you're still providing that autonomy and choice for students as they progress through the project. All right. So what is PBL? I always like to start with this because, for a lot of the folks that might be viewing the archive here, you might be like, oh, I do projects. And I thought the same thing. But until I really started to go to, actually, first PBL workshops I went to were EdTechTeacher ones. I was coming as an attendee, and I realized that PBL is not just teaching and then a project at the end, it has to have certain elements of the entire unit or the entire experience. Now, this graphic is from the Buck Institute. You may be familiar with some of their work. They have something called the gold standard PBL project design elements. And I'll just rattle through a few of them here. So to be PBL, you typically have to have some level of sustained inquiry. So it's happening from the start to the finish of the unit. So it's sustained. It's not just at the end. There has to be some driving question or problem or challenge that you present them with right at the beginning. It has to be real. It can't just be completely contrived as an experience. It has to be something that would possibly happen in the real world. And then there has to be some type of public product and reflection at the end. So it can be a presentation, kind of like a formal, almost like a science fair type thing, all the way to maybe it's an experience where they go out into the field and they pitch their idea to, say, a community action organization. So there's a lot of ways that you can do it, but those elements typically are there for a PBL unit. So more specifically, how would you lay this out? So in its most basic sense, you typically start with a project launch. So that is usually you propose some type of problem or scenario or question at the very beginning. And it's not just like, I know a lot of curriculum design, you have your essential questions for each unit. This is different from that. This is you are actually proposing a challenge to your class at the beginning with some type of entry event to get them interested. And they're going to work on that in different phases throughout the unit. So the second part of this is after you propose the driving question, the challenge, they start to tackle it. They can have some initial ideas on what the solution might be, but essentially this is where they build the background. So this is where you build your background knowledge, you develop your skills needed, the ones that are needed to answer that driving question. And this is where the authenticity comes into play, right? So if you have your driving question and you need to know these things to answer that driving question, that's why you are learning it, right? So this information is going to help you solve this challenge. The third part, developing the solution. So that's where students would actually go in and design and create and iterate, get feedback from you, get feedback from peers, and then do some revision. And then finally, they would present their product, present their solution, and not just to you, not just to the class, the best PBL environments, share it with the outside world, preferably experts in the field or somebody that would be affected by this particular project. All right, so those are the elements. What I like to show as well is here's an example of a traditional unit versus a PBL unit. They don't all have to look like this, but the reason why I show this is that you don't have to completely reinvent everything you're doing. It's more the timing of when you do it and in what context. So for instance, at the top, say I'm doing a World War II unit and I have all my lectures and quizzes and activities. I have my review, I have my exam, and I have a project that I do at the end. So I can still use all of that material. But if you look at that picture on the bottom, this is actually courtesy of New Tech Network, if you're interested in where this graphic came from. You have your project launch, right? So you have that inquiry hook, that activity at the beginning. And then as you're building context, that's when you can layer in your activities, your workshops, your lectures, all the things that you've already been doing. Then you have certain benchmarks when they're going to be working on their project, right? So you don't just wait till the end, like in that top part of the graphic. You're weaving it in as we go, and then you're giving them feedback at all these points. This can, of course, be mixed and matched, but I just like this visual because it shows that it's not that you're completely starting from scratch. It's more about you're moving the pieces around in a way that makes more sense and that sustains inquiry throughout the unit. So what is an example of this? So I was actually running a project-based learning workshop in the summer of, I believe it was 2018 up in Boston. And we had a wide-ranging group of teachers from just about every subject area you could imagine. And this was a high school science teacher. And they created just a quick blurb of what their PBL unit could look like. So they said it's, for a science and math interdisciplinary unit. Their driving question for the students would be, what is the best bioremediation strategy for mitigating oil on our school parking lot? So again, they needed to teach the idea of bioremediation. So they could have just taught it from the textbook and just read about it and maybe had an example from some other part of the world. Or they could say, how can we solve this challenge by knowing what bioremediation is? Right. And so that's the key, is they're taking the same content skills that you would have taught, but you're packaging it in a way that drives inquiry. And then they had a little bit more information at the bottom about like what they would actually do. So now we get to the part where it's EdTech Enhanced PBL. I'll pause for 1 second. Pardon me. Oh, while I'm doing this, shout out to our partners, Adobe. Thank you for this mug. Got it at Adobe Max last fall. Okay, so EdTech Enhanced PBL. First, I apply this to every instructional framework or theory that comes across EdTechTeacher or any school. EdTech is the amplifier. EdTech is not the end game, right? So it amplifies whatever type of instruction you're trying to do. So whether it's project-based learning or design thinking, or you're working on assessment literacy strategies, or you're trying to get kids to be more creative, whatever it is, like that's what you're doing. That's the foundation. The ed tech amplifies those practices. Not always in a good way either. Like if it's not implemented in a smart, strategic way, I have actually seen ed tech take a perfectly great lesson and kind of make it go sideways. So that's where there has to be a lot of strategy and skill as part of this. But if you do it well, it can take something like a PBL experience and amplify it and make it even more powerful for students and more practical to do for teachers. The second thing is that not all ed tech aligns best with all approaches. And what I mean by this is there might be a perfectly good ed tech tool out there or a feature of an ed tech tool that is completely useless in a certain context, but could be life-saving in another. And I think that a really skillful teacher with educational technologies can understand when to deploy certain apps and use certain features of apps for the context that you're in. So what I'm going to do is for the rest of the webinar, I'm going to go through a few different commonly used technologies. And I'll say, all right, if you wanted to use this tool, these are some ways that you can use it within the context of PBL that can maximize its use. I'll even provide a few examples as we go through of things that you may not even want to touch right now, or especially if you're doing a PBL activity. I'll give you one quick example here is if you're doing some program that is, let's just say it's an adaptive learning practice tool where you're doing a bunch of math problems and it feeds you different math problems based on how well you do. I mean, doing that for hours every day in a PBL unit probably doesn't make sense. Maybe as like a way to build background in a small step. But if a large percentage of your course or your unit is going to be having students on adaptive learning software going through practice problems, that's not an ed tech tool that's going to match up with a PBL experience, if that makes sense. All right, so let's start out. First part, if you think about the early stages of a PBL, a lot of times it involves research and curation of resources for students from the teacher's side of things. So one tool that came on the scene probably 4 or 5 years ago now is called Wakelet. I bring this up because I actually knew a few teachers in the district that I was in that they would take Wakelet boards, I think they're called boards, and they would load them up with resources related to whatever the topic was for that PBL activity, just as a one-stop shop for when the students started to do their research. You could also have students use it where maybe part of their project is at the beginning, they're building their background and they're adding resources to a Wakelet board. If you're not sure what Wakelet is, it's essentially a kind of think of it like a Padlet style Pinteresty tool, but it's designed in a way that it's very clean to view, to see, to organize, and also to share with your teacher if you're doing it as a student. The other thing is that you can use it for maybe you're presenting certain resources to the group or you want to give some feedback and reflections. You can do that right through the Wakelet. So as I mentioned, Padlet, don't forget Padlet. For those that have been in the EdTech game for a while, this has been around almost since the start. Probably one of the first tools that I started using regularly in the classroom, even before one-to-one was really a thing. So this is kind of like that digital corkboard, right? Where you can add in any type of media you could imagine. You can collaborate with it. You can have groups work. You can have teachers provide feedback. So this is another great tool for the early stages where you're curating resources, you're building some background knowledge, and you're trying to get kids to collaborate with each other, or if you want to go in and provide some feedback to them. So I would say Wakelet and Padlet, if you're looking for some nice curation tools during that first stage, these are some nice go-to options. Now, the next one is Google Drive. Now, the reason why I bring this up is it still shocks me. It shocked me as a teacher, and it still shocks me now, how there are some very basic foundational skills regarding organizing content and sharing that many students still do not know. They can get all the way to high school, and frankly, I blame Google Classroom, to be honest with you. And the reason why is because Google Classroom has done such a good job of kind of streamlining the workflow and having things go back and forth between the teacher. A lot of kids don't know how to organize their stuff anymore in Google Drive. So my suggestion is, if you're going to have kids researching and saving resources and you're in a Google workspace environment, make sure they have some foundational skills along these lines. If you need some help, we can also always share some resources, but make sure that they know how to collaborate, create and curate resources with each other in their groups within Drive. So that can be anything as simple as naming conventions and color coding and moving folders. The infamous add to folder versus move to, those are two entirely different things that have different functions and they're for different purposes. Knowing how to change share permissions, how to find articles, how to star things. So some of those skills I would almost consider make an intro activity to doing any type of projects or research. Do you know how to do these things? Can you demonstrate a quick understanding of it? Now, the next one I want to share, again, nothing, mind-bending here, but the idea of using Google Docs in more efficient ways for project planning. So this can be used for writing and research, for reflection, for peer feedback, for giving kids templates. The other part of this that's really expanding is if you've ever used the Smart Canvas, and I'll show you an example of that in a second, but that's when you go into Google Docs now, I think they just released it for Sheets not too long ago too. When you hit the app button, you're going to see all of these different options, from tagging other students to pulling up resources from your Drive to creating a map where you have certain people that are assigned to different tasks and it's color coded for you. So many things in there that are built into Google Docs now that can actually help students with project planning and collaboration. It's really just showing them how to get to it, and giving them some guidance. So these gifts aren't going to work right now for some reason, but I'm just going to do a super quick demo for you. So docs.google.com. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to change to, actually, for the sake of time, I'm just going to keep rocking. Take my word for it. So if you go into Google Docs, trust me, if you haven't done it before, hit the app button. You're going to see a box pop up with a ton of different options. All right, PBL and Slides. So this is probably the most commonly used ones for any type of project. So we'll go through this quick. Use it for collaborative research, for brainstorming. I love the idea of using it as a project pitch deck. Show them some examples of like a good TED Talk or just a good pitch in general. Have them pitch their idea, get some feedback from each other. You also could use it for final presentations. So like that same idea about like a TED Talk style presentation. If you're looking for resources, there's actually something called TED Ed Clubs. If you haven't heard of TED Ed Clubs before, if you've heard of TED, the TED Talks, they have TED Ed, which is great videos that are designed like TED Talks designed for kids that are animated. TED Ed Clubs is actually a program that teaches kids how to do TED Talks. So something to consider looking up if you are using something like Slides for final presentations. All right, Google Sheets. So PBL and Sheets, you might be like, how the heck did these have anything to do with each other? Well, first, they have a lot of templates in Google Sheets, which you can actually find in the Google Applied Digital Skills curriculum, which I'll reference in a second. But they have project planning and progress tracking built right in there. So it has conditional formatting, it has checkboxes, it has cells where you can add in resources, who's doing what's the timeline. It's essentially just a project management template that you can use with students that I actually find easier to use than like a Google Doc or Google Sheet. That's just my preference as far as projects. But I know even internally at EdTechTeacher, a lot of times if we have a big project coming up, like say for instance our summer learning pass, we do a lot of our project planning right in Sheets, right? So it is a good tool to use that will be useful in the world of work. All right, Jamboard. This is a great one if you're doing some iteration around certain proposals or ideas, or you're just unpacking challenges at the beginning during that entry event. But think about it as if you haven't used Jamboard, it's a way to kind of have like a digital whiteboard with sticky notes. They actually have like sticky note icons that you can take and modify and move around. You can also use it for visible thinking routines. We reference this in almost every workshop we do because I think they're so powerful. But if you look up the Harvard Project Zero visible thinking routines, you pair some of those, like See, Think, Wonder is a very popular one. Pair it with a Jamboard, and then you can have some really rich classroom discussions and reflections, and you can use the Jamboard to help organize that. So coming back to applied digital skills, this is one of the best collections of resources that Google has, and almost nobody knows about it. So if you look up applied digital skills curriculum, there's a section for teachers, and they have a ton of mini lessons pre-made for students that have all different types of skills, from writing research to finding resources, citing sources, organizing your drive, creating a presentation in slides, like a lot of stuff in there. And actually, two of the project planning Google Sheets that I found came from this curriculum. So if you're looking for some more resources, some tutorial videos that are already made for you that you can use that teach some of these skills, huge time saver. So say, for instance, you're like, I have no idea how to do conditional formatting on Google Sheets. That's fine. If you go into this curriculum, you'll be able to pull out a tutorial that you can just assign to students through Classroom really quickly. All right, Newsela. You might be saying, Newsela, why is that in there? Well, Newsela is a fantastic tool for the research phase of this. So whether you use the Newsela free version and provide some resources to students, or if your school has a subscription to it, you can use this to provide differentiated reading levels for different students in your class or different groups. It has a wide range of current events and primary sources. It has pro-con collections, just about any project idea that you have your students doing. There's going to be information on there in the Newsela platform. So if you have it, highly suggest leveraging that platform, particularly for the student research portion of a PBL project. PBL and Flip, formerly known as Flipgrid. One of the coolest ways I've seen this used in PBL was actually for elevator pitch videos. So as students were coming up with different solutions and ideas, they would use Flipgrid, go and create a 30-second pitch video, sharing their ideas, and then the teacher would either give feedback or open it up for some class feedback, and the students would jump in and provide some ideas. But it would be for students within their own group to go in and provide that feedback. I've also seen it used to communicate with experts in the field. So a lot of times, if you're doing a PBL project, you might bring in like a local leader of a civics group, or you might have a scientist Skype in or something like that. What I like about Flip, though, is that if, say, you have multiple sections of a class, or if the time zones are an issue, you don't have to worry about that because it's not live, right? So you just share the link to your grid with whatever experts or groups in the field that you want to get feedback from or to learn from, and then have your students engage in a classroom activity. I feel like that's one of the most powerful yet underutilized ways of using Flip or Flipgrid, is that connection with the community. So they used to have this thing called Grid Pals. I'm actually not even sure if they still do it, but that was just a way to connect teachers with other teachers in different parts of the world and have their students do some collaboration around projects through that. And Adobe Express. So when you get to the point where your students are maybe doing some advocacy or sharing their ideas with their authentic audience, this is an amazing tool to create visualizations, to create digital stories, to publish videos, to create beautiful parallax scrolling web pages, and it's all free. And if you have the free consumer version of it, where it has like you have to pay extra to get all this, just stop right there, contact your school tech director. You can get the free premium version of Adobe Express for everybody in your district, all your students, all your kids. It's an amazing tool. It's all integrated into one platform. Can't recommend it enough. So for any type of end product for PBL lessons or any type of advocacy for a PBL unit, highly recommend Adobe Express. If you have any questions about it or need any help, contact us, because we're an Adobe partner. We can come out, and in some cases, depending on the district you're in, you may be eligible for free professional development from us through Adobe. So just throwing that out there if anybody is interested in that offer. And our friends over at Book Creator, this is another excellent example of a creation tool that is designed for publishing. Again, one of the main parts of a PBL unit is that it's authentic and that you're reaching an audience that's real people, right? It's not that a teacher and students aren't real people, but someone beyond the classroom. Book Creator helps you easily create nice interactive digital stories that you can share out. You can have video, audio, bring in interactive like embed codes, and if you want it to be just a pure digital book. I also think this is a nice way to document the journey, because another big part of PBL is that it's not just about that final product, it's about reflecting on the experience as you went through it. Like their final prototype may never get to be a real product, right? Their solution for a town public policy may never materialize, but they're going to learn a lot in that process. So Book Creator can allow them to express themselves and document that. So maybe they do the beginning of the project, the middle, what was our process, what were we thinking as we came up with these solutions, and then reflect on the end on how they shared that out. So keep an eye out. Book Creator, also a very versatile and great tool, and we are good friends with the team at Book Creator. Soundtrap, I'm going to do this one pretty quickly because we are almost out of time. But this is if you want to focus on audio. So there is Anchor. Anchor actually just got bought by Spotify, so you can go through that. Soundtrap has an education version that's more designed for schools. That's why I referenced Soundtrap EDU, but that would be if you wanted students to make like an audio story or a narrative, or maybe even create a podcast. It's a nice collaborative creation tool. That you can also obviously use it for music. So it could be for audio, for podcasting and radio and audio projects, or it can be for creating music as part of a project. You could do that as well. So also recommend Soundtrap. And for the folks that want to do just video, like my students want to make a video project, Express has a video tool, but for students that want to do more advanced work, think like, Final Cut or like Adobe Premiere Pro. This is called Premiere Rush, and this is actually a free video creation tool for students. And it's very slick. You can use multiple tracks. You can overlay things. You can have sound effects. So if you have any students that want to make a really nice video, there is an Adobe Premiere Rush professional learning kit for anybody, right? So I can provide that to you if you just reach out to me. I'll send you all of the information, all the materials on teaching with Adobe Premiere. But that would be if your students wanted to create a video project, that is my recommendation as a video creation tool. So what's next? Here are a couple of trends that I see happening. So first is that a lot of teachers are starting to use the SDGs, as they're called, the Sustainable Development Goals from the UN, as a foundation or a background for their PBL projects. And partly because so many of these challenges are interdisciplinary in nature, that you can really weave in a lot of resources and a lot of connections to real world things that are happening based on those. And if you're looking for teachers to connect with, you go to www.teachsdgs.org, and you can connect with some folks there that have similar ideas. The other thing is I see virtual reality, and in some cases AR, becoming part of this as a final product. And also as a research tool. I won't go into it too much, but the immersive nature of documentaries, of learning about other cultures, but then also sharing it. I actually think Digital Promise had this, I think it was called My World 360. It was a documentary project where the students would actually document different places in their neighborhoods or different challenges they face, and that would be part of their product. So I think having those virtual experiences that they can share either as that final product or as they're learning about something, I see that taking off in the not too distant future. And then how can we not mention AI? It's everywhere. And ChatGPT as a teaching tool is exploding. Students using AI almost as like writing assistants and research. I know it's getting incredibly complex, but I think we'd be foolish to think that this is not going to be impactful in just about every instructional strategy we can imagine, including PBL. So for PBL, as a teacher, I could see this as like a research tool to help design possible driving question prompts, right? So you can put in the scenario, you could put in the unit, you can almost use it as a way to help design the PBL unit itself. And then from a student end, there are ways that you can have like role play conversations where you can actually have something like ChatGPT assume it's this role of this historical figure and you have a conversation with it. A lot of wild stuff on the horizon. But again, if you're interested in any of those connections, we have a ton of resources on our blog. So if you go to edtechteacher.org/blog, we have, I think we're up to 6 or 7 posts now specific to how to use AI to help you teach. That also goes for PBL. And I think of 100 ways that it could help with PBL as well. Okay, so our call to action, we're at the bottom of the hour. So for those of you joining live and for anybody watching on the archive, I just ask that you try to implement at least one of the ideas from today's webinar. So it could be one of the tools that I referenced. It could be thinking about how you might redesign one of your existing lessons to be more PBL-like. Give it a shot and let us know how it goes. Also, this is the last in our series leading up to summer. We actually start in a few weeks. So this is kind of the last call to purchase your summer learning pass. And I'll talk about that a little more in a second. And then if you are interested in having us work with you, our bread and butter, we love working with school districts. We love working with schools of all manner. So if you would like one of our amazing instructors to come work with you directly and work with your staff, we are happy to do that on site. We travel anywhere in the United States. We've been in a lot of different parts of the world. So even if you're in some remote location, feel free to reach out. I'm sure we can help you out. And we also do offer some hybrid and some virtual training options as well. All right, our summer learning pass, final pitch for this. If you are interested for $195, you get access to, I think we're up to 15 or 16 different courses. Each course is 3 one-hour webinars that you can go and participate and have conversations with the instructor. We have all of these different topics, everything from differentiation. We have one on PBL from tonight, SEL in action, digital creativity, coding, AI. We have some guest appearances from the folks at Book Creator, Book Widgets, Formative. It's going to be an amazing summer of content, and you keep it for a full year. So even if your summer, you're like, hey, I'm going to be extraordinarily busy, I have another job, I'm going to try whatever, you'll have access to all of this material for a full year after it. So I think it's an amazing deal. Even if you can only pop into 1 or 2 of the courses live, you still have access to everything. So if you're interested, go to edtechteacher.org/summer and grab your pass. If you think your school is interested in having a group go, we do offer group discounts for anything of 5 or more. Reach out to us directly. There's a contact link at our website, and we'd be happy to work with you. All right. So in closing, thank you so much for watching. Again, I'm Tom Driscoll, CEO of EdTech Teacher. We hope to see you again soon. Thanks and have a great night.